Hey there, everyone. Welcome to another Teach Kevin Your Thing session. For today's session, we're going to be talking about full stack web dev with Kent C. Dodds. How you doing, Kent?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am really excited and I'm actually happy you're in this session with me for two reasons. First of all, you like a role model. I actually study your work, read your articles, everything you put out. I really love what you do. Yeah, so you're a very big inspiration to me. So having you in here is just a wow moment. So thank you for taking out the time.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate those kind words.
Yeah, sure thing. The second reason is why you're here, which is full stack web dev and epic stack, but we're not going to talk about those yet. We have to introduce you. So can you please tell us who Kent C. Dot is? I don't know who doesn't know you in web dev, but just assuming, so be sure. So just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you've been doing, and anything you want to share.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't know who I am, but yeah. So I am a software developer. I've been doing this for I think over 9 years now. I guess I graduated in 2014. Went full time as a software developer. So yeah, about 9 years. And I am a full time educator. So I worked at various companies. Probably the one that most people would know is PayPal, and learned a lot of really awesome things. And while I was there, I was teaching everything that I knew, and eventually decided that I could make a bigger impact on the world by being a full time teacher than by working at PayPal. So I went full time teacher about, uh, yeah, I think it was 2019, 4 or 5 years ago. And yeah, it's been awesome. I created testingjavascript.com and epicreact.dev, and I'm working on epicweb.dev right now. I also speak at conferences and give workshops all over the world. So that is a little bit about me. I live here in Utah with my wife and 4 kids, and um, and yeah, that's a bit about me.
That's a lot. And from what you've said, it has to be like, like everyone should know about your web dev, like really. So you touched on a couple of things. So you said about teaching everything you know. Like it's also an idea I love so much. Like, why do you do that really? Like just from your own perspective, like what's the um philosophy behind it for you?
Yeah, well, I've always been somebody who sees knowledge as something less like M&Ms and M's and more like a fire. So M&Ms, when I share something with you, I have less for myself. But with a fire, if I share that with you, we both have fire. Like mine is not diminished, and now the room is brighter. So I see sharing things as a way to just make everybody in a better place.
Mm.
And so, yeah, even when I was a kid, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we are expected. There it is. There's the light
Yeah.
turned on finally. We're
Perfect.
expected to teach our peers in classes and things like that. And so I've been sharing and teaching since I was very young.
Mm.
And when I got into software, started teaching really early on. And it's a really great way to solidify my own understanding. And so that's another motivation for me, is to solidify my understanding of what it is that I'm trying to learn.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the way to actually think about it because it's mostly same for me, but I love your analogy with M&Ms and M's and fire. That is just brilliant. I love it. So yeah, thank you for sharing because from what you've shared so far, you got me, you shared with me, okay, not directly, right? So from your works, you shared testing philosophy, which is testing library. So we have the React one and the Vue one. I use the Vue one because I use Vue, but the idea was how I feel we should test. And that was my first point of saying, yo, I really love what you do. The way you explain your articles and the things you do, so I love it. So thank you for sharing. And in the spirit of sharing, right? That's why we're here. We're doing Teach Kevin your thing. But today we're talking about full stack web development and the epic stack, right? So before we get there, I know full stack development means a lot of things to a lot of people, right? So what does it mean to you, right? Yeah. What is full stack web dev?
Yeah, so to me, it's just being able to say yes to the product people is like my goal for as much of what I do as possible. And um, I've worked at a lot of different companies and a lot of different sizes, and when you specialize in a particular part of the stack, you can't really say yes. You have to say, well, if they do their thing and they do their thing and everything,
Mm-hmm.
then like, and that level of collaboration is really required at a certain scale. Like you just have a really hard time. Like imagine being a full stack web developer working at a giant company like YouTube.com or something like that. That might be a little bit more challenging to cover the entire stack yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Specializing is really useful there. But for most of us developers, I think that we can move faster if we have a little bit of control over our own destiny. And so having a little bit more control over the full stack from the database to the front end is super useful. That said, I think that there's a lot of usefulness just really just being able to control um, what code runs in the client and what code runs on the server. And
Mm-hmm.
even if the server that you have is talking to other services that are managed by other teams, you just get a lot more power being able to run code on both sides rather than what I've typically done in when I was at PayPal. Well, actually, when I was at PayPal, I also ran server code, but like the companies before that, I was all client side only, and you're just really limited on what you're able to do when you only manage the code that's running on the client. And so, yeah, I see full stack is yeah, it's kind of a broad term,
Yeah.
but anything that allows me to write code that runs both on the client and the server it gives me the flexibility that I'm looking for, and full
Mm-hmm.
stack definitely applies there.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense because, like you said, in a big team, like in a large team, right, you could specialize, right? But if you want to like build something across the stack that is like a web app that is holistic, you have control of the front end, of the back end, and everything. That is full stack. And I think for most applications, you could go full stack and it all works for you. So speaking about full stack, I know you introduced the Epic Stack at RemixConf. I love the all the talks, by the way. The keynote was brilliant. I love it. And also your
Mm,
talk was just amazing. So
thank
I
you.
like I watched everything, both the stream and the replay. I watched them both. They were that good.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really good. So let's talk about the Epi Stack first before we go a bit about why you went with Remix, because I do know you have a lot to say about Remix. So what is the Epic Stack like? What was the motivation behind you making the Epic Stack, and what is the offering?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea in the talk was um, first I kind of established that we have a lot of choices in building web applications, and some of the technologies you use together, other of the technologies are quote unquote competing technologies, and so you wouldn't use them together. And so you have to make decisions between which ones that you use. And at the end of the day, it really actually you're probably fine using any of them. Like there are great companies and great products built on every one of these technologies, and there are of course trade-offs and things. But the there's just an enormous weight put on people to make the right choice when there actually isn't a right choice. And
Mm-hmm.
so um, I decided that I have a lot of opinions myself and that I feel are very well founded. And so I created a project starter and reference that makes all the decisions that I would make for most projects that I would work on. And then people can use those opinions and get started in their products very quickly. Um, so that's the idea behind the Epic Stack. It's a project starter and reference that embodies my opinions of how to build web apps.
That is amazing because I don't know. I think we sort of sync a bit because I myself have been thinking about how JavaScript have too many choices, which is good, but the everyday developer could find it overwhelming because there are like 6 ways to do state management, for example, right? Like, and it's just too much, right? So if you just want to build stuff, that's where opinions are good, right? Like these are like there's a smart foundation for you to get started with that you don't have to think about all that. Just focus on your business logic. So I really love that, and so I think a big part of the Epic stack is Remix, right? So what is Remix? I've had a bit of talk from the Hydrogen team on what Remix is, but for you, what is Remix?
Uh, well, Remix is a web framework that has a laser focus on the modern user experience and with a foundation on web fundamentals. So progressive enhancement is a really big piece of what makes Remix Remix. And it like as far as the specifics of the technologies, it's a React based framework that at least uses React for the UI. It's based on top of React Router for managing routing, but then it's a lot more than that. It includes a custom compiler and builder or bundler using ESBuild. It's not like some custom language or anything, but same thing that Vite is built on top of. And but like with custom conventions and things, and it's also your data management library as well. So it manages data fetching. Everything in Remix comes back to the URL, and so that by doing that, Remix is really powerful in the simplicity for the developer and the positive user experience for the user, because you can just give Remix a URL and it knows all of the code and all of the data that needs to be loaded. So it can prefetch things really well. It also has nested routing, so it can optimize the data that excuse me, the data that's being
That's fine.
loaded. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, there are a couple of real solid pillars that make Remix Remix, and I'd say that's progressive enhancement in web foundation, like so web primitives, and yeah, just the modern user experience. It's a mix of what we used to do
Mm-hmm.
and what we do now to
Mm-hmm.
give us the simple developer experience of a decade ago with the excellent user experience of the modern day. That is what Remix is.
Yeah. I think that is actually amazing, really, because I saw again, like I said, so I'm not stalking at this point, really. I just love your content. So I saw the talk on progressive enhancement you gave, and what really got me was you get the mental model of websites. So right now we call them MPAs because we need the versus thing going on, but with the capabilities of an SPA, which makes a lot of sense, right? So I did a space this week just to talk on the URL because these days most developers that are just doing front end web dev, right? They don't use the URL to their full capacity because you could easily
Mhm.
just put some components and swap them out really to change the view. So the URL is underused, and I really like a framework that actually embraces the core web fundamentals. And I think that alone really makes um, what you're doing with the Epic stack really, really enticing for me. So, with all that said, I
Mhm.
think let's get into seeing how we are building stuff with the Epic stack, and of course with Remix and everything you want to show. Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds great.
Cool. Sharing your screen now.
All right, I think yeah, here we go.
Ooh,
Great. So this is
that's nice
epicweb.dev.
illustration.
Yeah, this is where I'm currently
Mm-hmm.
producing a bunch of content. We've got articles and tutorials and
Mm-hmm.
tips. Tips are like little mini videos that kind of one-off things. But yeah, on here is where I announced the Epic Stack, and I've got the Remix Conf
Mm-hmm.
video on here, and you can read through
Yeah.
what the Epic Stack is all about. I think, and then here's the repo for the Epic Stack. Um, About a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago, I was working at Remix, and
Mhm.
I helped to develop a feature in Remix called stacks, which are project starters, and people can make their own. There are actually a bunch of these. If you go to the Remix stack tag
Mm.
on GitHub, lots of different people have made custom ones that are their own
Mhm.
thing.
Cool.
And wow, it looks like mine is the top. That's exciting. But
Yeah.
the official ones, there's the Indie Stack, Blue Stack, and Grunge Stack,
Mhm.
all using different combinations of technologies and things already set up for you. So right now I'm piggybacking off of the Remix Stack feature,
Mhm.
but eventually we'll have our own CLI and everything.
Oh, cool.
But I think the best way to explore this is to actually build something. So I'm going
Yeah.
to try my best to build a Twitter clone and see how far we can get with doing that. So
Interesting.
we'll start here on the desktop. And just at the top here, we have this command to get started. So I'm going to paste that here. This is using the create remix CLI because it's using that stacks feature.
Mhm.
We're going to call this epic Twitter. And this is going to create our app. So there's a bunch of stuff that's about to happen here. Um, one of them is we're actually downloading this repo
Okay.
as like just the files, not the Git history or anything. And
Mhm.
then we're going to be running this remix init script that does a whole bunch of stuff for us.
Okay.
And we also install the dependencies and stuff as well.
Mhm.
So
Cool.
yeah, finished installing. It's running the remix init script. We're using Prisma, so it's generating the Prisma client and applying migrations, seeding the database with some stuff. We have a admin user called Cody with the
Mm.
password Cody loves you.
Mhm.
And actually, I've got Cody on the desk here with me.
Hey,
So
Cody.
hi everybody. And yeah, so now the project is actually set up, but it wants to know if we want to set up deployment right now, and
Oh,
so I will.
cool.
And it deploys to fly.io. So if you're logged in locally into Fly, then it will ask you if you're good with that. If you
Mhm.
want to log in as another user, then you can do that. But I'll proceed. Then it determines the best region for you. So Fly allows you to deploy your region to or your app to any one of 34 places all over the world, and it will tell you the one that's closest to you is SJC, so that's where we're going to deploy.
Okay.
The Epic Stack is set up to deploy to multiple instances, so you don't have to deploy to just one place in the world. You can go wherever in the world is your users are.
Mhm.
And it's all set up not only for where your app is running, but also where your data is located as well. So it replicates your data all over. It's awesome. Um,
Amazing.
so what it's telling me now is we're creating persistent volumes because we're using SQLite for our database. And so we need to have a volume or a hard disk basically for our application. And so it's telling us that when we deploy, if we only have one instance, we have to take down the old instance and bring up
Mhm.
a new one. So during that time, there will be some downtime. We're going to answer yes because we're just building something simple. This is what I would recommend if you're just getting started, is to just do a single instance, and then you can do multiple later when you start getting customers. The reason we made two is because we're actually deploying or we're creating two apps. One is a staging app and the other is a production app. And
Mm.
so when you use the GitHub integration or the GitHub action that's built in, if you have a dev branch and push to that, that will get deployed to staging, and then the main branch will get deployed to production. And so we create two apps for you, and so therefore two volumes.
Mm.
And in the future, I'm pretty confident that we could actually do away with this and instead have PR preview deploys. So every PR can get its own environment and everything. I'm pretty
Mm.
sure that that will be pretty straightforward in the future.
Yeah. Cool.
So now it's asking me if I want to deploy right now, and I say yes. But this takes like quite a while because we are building a Docker container and everything like that. So yeah, it's going to take a bit, and we're deploying two apps as well. So I'm going to open in a new tab and
Mm-hmm.
open code in our Epic Twitter, so that we can play around with things as we go. Here it is. So I'll pause right here while this is going and just see, are there any questions you had about the creating a new app and getting it deployed?
No, everything seems really well thought out. I like the like you could immediately deploy your apps. That's just amazing, really. Like, yeah, and of course, you're also thinking about the staging environment and the main environment. So you're actually given a convention of how to like deploy your apps, where you could have a staging area for testing out things and your prod for your live code for your users. I love it.
Cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
I think that um, like there's a lot of power in being very opinionated.
Mm-hmm.
You notice like we didn't really ask many questions. I can't avoid
Yeah.
asking this question or this one because that's Fly is just wanting to make sure that people are aware.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk to them about getting having some flag that I can pass to get rid of that,
Yeah.
so you don't have to ask that question because once you answer the question of whether you want to deploy, what account you're deploying with, and where you're going to deploy. The rest of this shouldn't require any feedback from you at all.
True.
And that's one of the guiding principles of the Epic stack, which I can actually show you in the docs here. We have our guiding principles. Uh, so one of them, sorry, I just got like this tickle in my
Yes.
throat thing.
So sorry about
Um,
it.
is to minimize setup friction. And so I want to make it so you can deploy as quickly as possible. And that involves like, um, there are definitely services that we have to use to make things work, like hosting and email. And so like we needed a Fly account. If you didn't have a Fly account, you'd need to set that up first.
Mm-hmm.
For the email stuff, we actually defer setting that up till later. And so we can deploy before you set up your email provider, which is quite nice.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so there are some things that you really have to do to really take this to production, but I want to make it so you can get to a deployed state as quickly as possible. And yeah, so that is why we've got the CLI here. So
Yeah.
cool. So
Really.
let's take a look at the app itself. So one of the things that it will log to us eventually is the script for getting things started. So npm run dev, we'll get our dev server going, and that gets us going on here. Now, there are a couple of interesting things here that are going on. So first of all, we have the node inspector running, and so you can connect your
Mm-hmm.
inspector to
Yeah.
the app instance, so you can use debugger statements and stuff. And then we have mock service or a mock server installed. So if you've got third-party APIs that you're talking to and stuff, that's all going to be mocked here. And that's the case for our email service. So we don't actually call the email service
Mm.
because we don't want to actually send emails during our development and stuff. We'll just put the email in this terminal output. But one of the other guiding principles is offline development. So we want to be able to develop offline as much as possible. And so mock service worker allows us to do that.
Mm.
And then, yeah, we can open up our app on port 3000, which opened over here. Here we go.
No.
And so here is the Epic stack. It lists all the technologies, all that stuff. Of course, this is like you're going to delete this page for sure,
Yeah.
and like customize it to your own desires. But let's look at a couple of things that it has for us already. So we can log in. As mentioned, it seeded the database with a bunch of users, and one of those was Cody. So we can
Mm.
say Cody, and Cody loves you.
Mm-hmm.
We can say remember me, and then log in. And now we're logged in as Cody. We can go to our profile. We can edit our profile. We can change the picture. So I can go, let's see, yeah, here we go. Go here and say, yeah, this one. Change it to
Mm.
my profile picture. Oh, right, that image is actually really big. That's going to be too big.
Yeah.
But you can change it. I
Mm.
should make a small version of that image.
Yeah.
Here, let's
Sure.
do this. I'll take a photo, and we'll use that instead.
Oh yeah. Brilliant.
So on desktop, Here we go.
Oh, cool.
I don't know
I,
why that is not loading. That's
yeah.
weird. Here, well, I'll explain that here in a second. Let's save the
Mhm,
photo and see what happens. There we go.
mhm.
So,
Yeah.
um,
I'm.
yeah, so like the photo upload all totally works, and it's all self-hosted as well. So you don't have to worry about setting up some other service or anything like that. It's actually all hosted in our own database,
Mm,
which is really nice. You can adapt that if you want to use some other service for some reason, but um, yeah, it's all built in.
cool.
And then, of course, we can change our password and all that stuff.
Mhm,
Changing email is a feature that will come eventually.
yeah.
So that's built in. We also have this notes feature. So this just kind of demonstrating how to make nested routes and stuff like that,
Mhm,
and work with these CRUD operations that are
yeah.
typical for web apps. So yeah,
Mm,
that is pretty much what you have built in. There are actually quite a few other things that are built into the app. Another one is we have an admin section for the cache. So there's a built-in cache. We're not using the cache for anything right now,
mhm,
and so that's why it's empty. But yeah, there's a lot of caching stuff built in. There's a bunch of other things like if we go here and look at our timing, we actually have server timing built
mm,
in, so we can see exactly how long it took to do
yeah.
different things on this page. So if it's really slow, you can find out why is it really slow. Um, and yeah, there's testing built in. We can run npm run test ete dev, or here let's just do
Mm,
these.
cool.
Oh, that's weird. Let's do run so we can just watch it here. But yeah, so we've got end-to-end tests that will run through our onboarding process and our reset password. All of that stuff is fully tested here. We
Mm,
also have unit tests or lower level tests for a couple of the most important features. So as you're making changes and stuff, you won't mess those things up, and you can also use those for reference.
mm,
TypeScript is all set up and prettier and all of that other stuff too. So that's what you get when you just get started with Remix. So,
mm.
any questions about what we've
Just
got so far?
first, admiration for what you've built because we don't get this a lot in JavaScript land, right? Because this you have like a full thought out system with authentication, with file uploading, with deployment and everything that just work. I saw a tweet the other day. I think you saw it too, right? Where there was a comparison between Rails scaffold and Laravel, then with JavaScript, and I feel we need more things like this really, and I really love what you're doing with it. So no question, just observation. And you also set up testing. People don't like to test anymore these days, I don't know why, but you you set up testing, end-to-end testing with Playwright, and it's just amazing. This is great.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I think those things are important as well, and it's nowhere near what Rails or Laravel are. It's a lot more opinionated for one,
Mm-hmm.
so limited, but it can get there, and I think that eventually that's kind of the goal. I know
Mm-hmm.
that Blitz.js was kind of intended to be the Rails for the JS community. The opinions there never really spoke to me. But yeah, these are, I mean, obviously these opinions speak to me because they are mine.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, the other aspect of this is that like you can use this as a reference when you're building your own app. So you're like, how did he do image hosting, or how did he do Playwright
Mm-hmm.
setup, or whatever else? You can reference this, and I think for most people that's probably how they're going to use this. So
Interesting.
we while we were going through this, we had these two windows pop up. That's because these, well, they were supposed to. Wait, that's
Mm-hmm.
weird. That has never happened before.
Yeah.
But yeah, they did get deployed. We can actually, here, let's do this. If we look at our production deploy of this app, we should see, oh, it's still pending. Yeah,
Okay.
that's taking longer than usual. That it should not be pending. Yeah, it looks like it's
It's
actually
yeah,
working, so I'm not sure.
it's actually because you're live coding. So
Yeah.
yeah. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, yeah. We do have like here's the logs for
Mhm.
our app getting started up, and the whole process worked.
Mhm.
The migrations ran,
Yeah.
getting the server started worked, and our health checks are passing. So yeah, there's just something weird with my DNS locally or something like that. That's kind of weird, but anyway,
That's
it does deploy and it does work. Now the next
mhm.
thing that it's asking, actually, it's not done, is it's asking whether we want to set up the GitHub Action deployment. And
Mm.
so I'm going to say yes. It's going to pop up creating a new repo. So we'll
Wow.
just create a new repo called Epic Twitter example or test. And we'll create that repo. And with that, I come over here and paste that. And now it asks, or it opens up a couple other tabs, and it says you need to create a secret for the Fly API token. So let's go do that. Um, I'm going to do this off screen so you
Yeah,
don't
for
see my
sure.
token,
Yeah. I can actually bring
because
it
that
here
would,
too. So that's fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So just one sec while I create this token. Epic
Mhm.
Twitter, create, copy. And I'm going to move the action secrets over as well. So you just create a secret, and then the last thing it asks you, you can share my screen now. I'm not going to share anything else sensitive. Here, actually,
Mhm.
I'll even get rid of the token from my clipboard.
Cool.
But the last thing it asks you is if you'd like to commit and push your changes. I would. And so it's committing and
Wow.
pushing. And now we come over here um, to Epic Twitter test, and we've got it right here. And then we've got our action that's
Mm.
running right now that includes ESLint, TypeScript, vtest, and Playwright. And once those all pass, then we'll go on to deploy because we're on the main branch that's going to deploy to production. And now we're all set up to develop, commit, and automatically deploy with tests verifying that we're not going to break anything.
Oh,
So that is getting started with the Epic stack.
it's an amazing experience, really. Like everything is just well thought out. I love the strong emphasis on testing because, like I said, it's almost like a dying culture, but hopefully we don't get to see it die. So yeah, I love it.
Awesome. Like I said, this is great for people who are just getting started on their new
Mhm.
projects,
Yeah.
and that most of us are not starting new projects all the time. Most of us are building on existing applications, and so
Cool.
that's why I say the Epic Stack is mostly useful. Like for most people, it's useful as a reference implementation.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you want to play around and experiment with something that where it's not compromising on having to sign up for a bunch of different services and stuff. Um, you sign up for one service, it's a hosting. You're always going to need a hosting service. But provided that, yeah, that's what you're going for is just a lot of power, then this is really good. And what we've done so far, all of that still fits within the free tier on Fly. So you
Mm.
can deploy the whole app and everything for free and only start paying when you actually start making money on your idea. So um, yeah, so I don't know how much time we've got, but
Yeah.
we can try and build a couple of things in here to kind of explore what it's like to work in the Epic stack if you want.
Yeah, sure. We have like 26 minutes, I think. But we could go
Okay.
as long as you want. Yeah, I'm not going anywhere, so I'm good.
Okay.
So
Sounds good.
I just want to interject. With these days we have a ton of services, especially because of serverless. Everything is as a service right now. But with the Epic Stack, you sort of like going the other way. Let's limit those services. Only use what you need, like hosting. That's really interesting.
hmm
Mm,
Yeah, that's very intentional. I'm
mm,
highly concerned by the amount of services that people are just okay with wiring together for their apps. I just think that it's really not as hard as people think to implement or at least support running things that people often pay services for.
Mhm.
especially early on in the project, where like a lot of times people say, well, I want to use these services to hit the ground running so I don't have to spend all the time building those services. And that's fine. I understand that. But at the same time, when you need to scale, you don't want to use those services because they're not going to satisfy your requirements, or they're going to be prohibitively expensive. And so you're going to have to move all that stuff over. And so if it's just as easy to start up a new project that has all of that stuff built for you, and then
Mhm.
you can make changes to it as needed, then I think that is a good thing. And so, yeah, I limit services, and not just third-party services, but services in general. And so, even when we don't have background jobs yet, but when we do, those background jobs will start out as being a part of your app that just kind of run in the background. So you don't even have to have your own service that you're managing for background jobs.
Mm.
Eventually, like, we'll make it adaptable. That's another one of the
Yeah.
guiding principles is adaptability, so that you can move it into a worker if you want to, or if you need to, because there are definitely situations where you need to do that. But for just getting started, I think having a bunch of different services you have to wire together, you're not doing yourself any service.
Yes, that makes a great deal of sense. Yeah. So let's get on building with this. I have a couple of questions, but I'm gonna ask that down the line. Yeah.
Okay, great. Also noticed it looks like our
Oh yeah.
second deploy did go
Shucks.
through, so that's also fantastic. So,
Mhm.
yeah, and actually you can take a look at the logs here, and yeah, just building the Docker container, uploading it, and getting it deployed. So,
Okay.
great. So let's come back over here, and I think I want to one challenge that I have when I'm building something fast is I get tied up with all of the different cool and fun things that I could do, and we end up not covering a lot of ground. So I'd rather focus on covering more ground than building a bunch of things. So you'll see me be a little hand wavy over things, hopefully, if I can control myself. So I think the best thing to start out with is probably a page where we list all of the users. So right now, if you just go to /users, that's a 404. So let's add a
Mhm.
page here that lists all of the users so that we can like follow people and stuff.
Cool.
So let's go to our routes. We're using people who are familiar with Remix might be surprised by this plus thing.
Mm-hmm.
We are using a package called Remix Flat Routes that implements the V2 convention for Remix routing, but goes beyond that and adds this feature called hybrid routes that just makes it so you can create folders. So if we didn't have hybrid routes, then everything inside of this folder would actually be in the root directory,
Okay.
and it would have an underscore marketing dot in front of it.
Oh, cool.
And same with this, all of these would have an underscore auth dot in front of these. And you end up with a routes directory that just has an enormous amount of files, which is fine. It's really not that big of a deal, but your file names get to be really long, and I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're using hybrid routing, hybrid flat routes for that reason. So yeah, let's go to users. We want to create something for the index page. So we're going to say index.tsx. And the first thing I always like to do when I'm building a new route is I like to manage the data first, and then we can build the UI into that later. So we're going to make a remix loader that involves a couple of these things, exporting a loader. And I'm going to await Prisma, which we're going to get from DB server. Users find many, and here's our users, and then say users. So now we're loading all of the users. Of course, Twitter would never do this, but we can. Yeah. So here's
Mm-hmm.
all of our data for those users. When you don't, in Remix, if you don't have a component that you're exporting, then it turns your route into what we call a resource route. That's just like an API endpoint. So in Next.js, you're probably familiar with the API directory and stuff, and that's where
Yeah.
all your API routes go. In Remix, your regular routes can be API routes if they don't
Mm-hmm.
export a default export for the component.
Nice.
And in fact, you can even use routes as API routes as well, because you can directly make a request to that route as well, which is pretty sweet.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. So then let's export let's do a Remix component. We'll call this our users index. And we've got our data from use loader data from Remix. And then here we can say, let's put a div here with a class name container and MX auto and background of night 500, padding y of, I don't know, like 8 and padding x of 12. Maybe I
Mm.
got those mixed up. I don't know. We'll see if it looks good at all. Rounded 3XL.
Okay.
And then we'll have let's see. Actually, you know what? I want to put the title outside of this. So we'll do another
Okay.
div that has those.
Yeah. So you're
And then we'll have an H1.
okay.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, I guess you're using Tailwind for styling, right? Tailwind
Oh yeah.
CSS?
Yeah, Tailwind is amazing.
Yeah. I
I
love it
can't
too.
imagine using anything else. You can use other like regular CSS, and in fact, we do have a couple .css files in here. Like we've got some pretty interesting and complex relationships between different elements for our forms and stuff like that. But and that's actually using CSS modules.
Mm,
And
cool.
then our font is just a regular CSS file. So yeah, we've got a kind of a mix of different things in
Yeah, of
here.
course. That makes sense.
Okay, so we'll map our users or an li for each one of them. Yeah, that's right. Here we go. User dot name. Name is optional, so we'll say user dot username as well. There we go. And then, of course, the key prop user dot id. Great. So with that now, we've got our users. Dun, da, da,
Ooh,
da.
cool.
Looks great.
Yeah.
So let's make this a little bit nicer so that you can actually navigate to those users' profile pages. So let's do this. We'll make this have a class name of flex, flex column, give it a gap of maybe 2. And then we'll have an image where the source is user dot image ID. Actually, we have a utility for get user image source, and we can just pass the user. There we go. Yeah, that looks about pretty good. User dot image ID. And then the alt is going to be the user's name or user dot username, because again, the name is optional. And then a full rounded with 24. I think let's do 36. And then we'll have yeah, let's just do a div that has the user dot name and another div for the username. And this one can be text a 400 just to give it a little bit different look there. And then, of course, we probably want to wrap all of this in an anchor tag so that we can navigate to that user's page too. So we'll say href is user dot ID. And that's a relative route because we're on the user's page. So we want to go
Yeah.
to /user/user, or actually it's username,
Okay.
not their ID. So we want to go to add another segment to the URL. That's the
Yeah.
username. And instead of using an anchor tag, in the future, actually, Remix will support just using regular anchor tags, and it will use event delegation to make it a link. That'll be
Mm-hmm.
sweet.
Yeah.
But for right now, we have to use the link component from Remix, and we'll say to. Okay. And I think, here, we'll need to move this class name to that link. Here we go. And boom.
Mm.
So we need to display flex on some of this stuff, I think.
Yeah.
So let's do
On
that.
the UL.
Yeah, so we'll want to, yes, on the UL. Class name, flex, gap of 4 maybe, or 8. And justify center and flex wrap. There we go. Ta-da! That looks great. And so now we can go to one of these users and see their user page. And we could add a follow on there in the future as well if we
Yeah.
want to.
Sure.
Cool. So any questions about getting like loading data? We're talking to the database. We're getting data into our UI. Um, yeah, and this is regular React stuff, so maybe a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of a distraction. But
Yeah. No, it's really super easy. Yeah, everything is straightforward. I see you're getting the data from the loader, right? So that's where you get your data from. So it's still so what so the part that gets the JSON, that because the first time you wrote this file, we had just JSON, right? So that's all done by
hmm
Remix, and then when it sees you have like a component, it makes that available as the data, right?
hmm
Cool.
yep, that's the idea.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, before we had the component as a
Mhm.
default export,
Yeah.
Remix treated this as just an API endpoint that you could call. Once you add
Oh.
the component, then it says, "Oh, this isn't an API endpoint. You're trying to render this as a component, and
Mm-hmm.
because of the conventional routing, this is under the user's route, and so we'll render this inside the
Mm-hmm.
user's the outlet for this particular route."
Perfect. I I really love it. Cool.
Cool. I do too. It's great.
Yeah.
And I should mention also that like before we had this request object in here. This
Yeah.
is a web fetch request. So if you dive into the type definitions, you're looking at the web fetch API.
Okay.
This is one thing that I really like about Remix is that rather than wrapping web primitives and exposing their own fancy APIs. Remix actually wraps whatever APIs you're using for request response. Here we're using Express. It wraps those request objects and turns them into web fetch APIs. And so you're just working with web fetch stuff. JSON is just a utility that returns a response. Where is that? Yeah. So here's our
Yeah.
JSON function that returns actually a special kind of response. It's a typed response. So we get nice type handling. But
Mm-hmm.
the idea is that it is a response object that's just web fetch API. And so here you can also add headers, and you can do a cache control, say public max age 3600. And so now the browser will cache this. You can do an S max age. Now the CDNs will cache it, stuff like that. So it's really nice. It's just building right on top of the web platform and exposing those as part of the important APIs for you, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So if we wanted to lock this down and say, hey, actually, this is a private social network, and so only
Oh.
users who are um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, logged in are allowed to be here, then we can actually use another utility that's built in that's called require user ID, or even we have permissions, role-based permissions already set up as well. So you could say only if the user has this specific permission. But yeah, let's require user ID. And we're going to use here, I got to bring back that request so we know who's requesting this.
Yeah.
And then we say request right here. And if we're not logged in, then we're going to be redirected to the login. And what's cool is also it has this redirect too. So once we do log in, if I
Yeah.
say Cody and Cody loves you, whoops, uh, now we
Yeah.
get sent back to where we were before. So
Perfect.
we do have really nice utilities for creating protected routes and things like that. It's pretty easy to use, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Yeah.
But we don't want to make this a closed off social network. We want to make this something
Open.
that anybody can use.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's. Is there anything else that you want to see? I know we're getting like we're pretty close to the end of our time, but
Yeah. Sure.
I'm happy to stick around for as long as you want as well. But is there
Cool.
anything else you want to see in particular?
Not really quite yet. I think we're actually getting
Okay.
there. So yeah, let's keep going. I'm gonna bring the questions
Okay. Well,
as
why
I
don't we
get
do
them.
this then?
Okay.
What? Why don't we make it so that you can favorite people's notes?
Mm.
So eventually we can move this over to tweets and stuff like that, and I can show you that. But let's just add the ability to favorite other users' notes. I think that would be kind of a useful illustration of a couple features.
Yeah, sure.
So where I like to start with stuff like that is if the data model doesn't support it yet, I like to start with the data model.
Okay.
So we're using schema .prisma. So we're using Prisma. We go into our schema here, and we need to modify some things. Like I said, we've got notes. We could change this to tweets if we wanted to, but we'll leave it at notes for now, just to keep things easier. And we just need to add a new model for a favorite. So we'll say model favorite, and we'll let Copilot help us out here. So it's going to have an ID, created at and updated at. Sure. The owner, actually, I don't think you need an updated. Well, whatever. We'll move on. Yeah, we've got the owner, so the person who favorited the thing, and then the note that they favorited. That seems pretty reasonable. Don't you love our AI assistants? They're
Yeah,
amazing. That
Copilot
was
is
so
good.
easy.
Yeah, right. Like it just
Yeah.
take all the boring stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It looks like the note when I saved that, Prisma automatically updated a bunch of stuff to make these relationships work, and I don't know why they capitalize this property because that doesn't make any sense at all. So we're going to lowercase that. We're going to do the same thing for this, and I just realized this is capitalized too. I'll have to fix that. That's super annoying.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've got our favorite, and luckily, this is not a breaking change for our schema.
Mm-hmm.
We can have existing data. We don't need to make any changes
Yeah.
to like the data that's in the database because no notes will have a favorite anyway. But we do need to issue a migration so that our database schema or our database has this model. And so
Okay.
to account for that, I'm going to keep the app running. Actually, you know what? I'm going to stop the app because I don't want to have two of those. And so we'll run npx prisma. Let's see, migrate dev. And this is going to, let's see, the migration was modified after it was applied. We'll reset, yeah, because we seeded and stuff, I think. But yeah, this is all local stuff anyway. So yeah, we're going to lose that data, enter a name for this migration. This is going to be called favorites. Favorites. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's going to run the seed script. We could modify the seed script to generate a couple of these favorites as well, but we don't. We're not going to do that right now.
Yeah, sure.
But the seed script is just right here, and you just use regular interactions with the Prisma client to seed your database with whatever you want. Okay, great. So with that now, we're going to go to a note, so a specific note, and we're going to add whether or not the user that's currently logged in has favorited this, so we know whether to show the heart as like filled in or not. And then we're going to add a mutation here that will allow the user to change whether or not that particular thing is favorited. So we are already getting the user ID for the user who's logged in. So earlier we saw require user ID, and that will make the user go and log in.
Yeah.
Get user ID will just get the user ID if the user's logged in, and if they're not, then the user ID will be null. And so here we're just using that to determine whether or not we're looking at our own note, because if we are, then we're going to add the edit button and delete button. And if we're not, then we won't. So we already have the user ID. Now we just need to determine whether this user has favorited this note already. So let's get a favorite. Wait, Prisma favorite find unique. Where, and no, that's not it. Where the user or owner, hold on a second. No, not find unique. So find first. Here we go.
Okay.
Okay, where the owner ID is the user ID and the note ID is the params note ID. Now this is complaining because the user ID could be null. So if the user ID is null, then we won't bother doing this. There we go.
Okay.
Sweet. So now we're either going to have a favorite or it will be null. Oh, you know what? One other thing that I forgot to mention over here. So here we're loading all of the users, but we're getting all of the data for all the users. And luckily, our Prisma schema has thought about this sort of thing happening. And the user's password is actually not included in the user schema. It's a separate thing altogether. So we're
Mm-hmm.
not going to be sending hashes, even though we made this mistake, which is nice. So, but we
Interesting.
want to select specific things for this anyway. And so right here, as soon as I add that select, now users is just an array of empty objects. And so we're getting type safety from our backend code to our UI code. And it's saying, hey, the user doesn't have an ID or a username or image ID. So now we can add those things back and just trust TypeScript to let us know like if we missed anything, which is
Mm,
pretty sweet.
sweet.
Yeah, something I failed to mention, but hopefully was a little obvious, was this loader only runs on the server. So you're
Yeah.
not talking to your database directly from the UI.
Mm-hmm.
This code runs on both the server and in the client. So we just call it UI code, not browser code or client code or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sweet.
Cool.
So with that, we should probably do the same thing with our select here. So as far as the favorite goes, we don't really care about all of this data. We really just care about whether it exists at all. So we're going to just say select the ID, so it doesn't send back very much stuff.
Mm,
And then we'll say is favorited based on whether there's a favorite. Um, here we go. So if it's favorited, then we've got that favorite. All right, good stuff. So now let's go here and add a console log for the data. And start up our server again. And then we'll, oh, right, we reseeded the database, so all of our users are different now. Here we go. Awesome. And then if we go here and go to our console, I click on this, we get our data. We see it, let me bump that up a little bit so y'all can see it. Is favorited is false, is owner is false, and here's information on the note. So let's make it so that we can favorite this by adding a mutation. But before I do that, I've been doing a lot of talking and I talk really fast. So is there anything in here that you had a question about before we actually make it so we can favorite something?
So, what was the decisions that made you have a separate model for your passwords and not just have it as a
Yeah,
field and use it?
yeah. So that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
It's because you don't want to accidentally send password hashes to the client. And so if somebody forgets to opt into specific things in here, then they will send all of that data to the client.
Mm.
Additionally, even if I did say I want to also select the password, this isn't going well. Actually, yeah, this would send the password hash. So don't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it protects against
Mm-hmm.
all like sending everything over. So let's take a look at what will happen because the way we've got things set up here. So if I console log the data here, and then we go to the users page, and here's all of the users. And it does not include the password field because
Yeah.
that's not part of the model. That's just a relationship that's in the database.
Oh,
And so that is the reason why we have a separate model from the user schema. And that's the sort of thing that like is really nice about something like the Epic stack is it helps you avoid those types of pitfalls without having to try avoiding those pitfalls.
got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so let's display a heart somewhere useful, probably here at the bottom, I guess. Here, let's move this here. So we'll display this whether or not this user is an owner. And then actually, if they are not an owner, then well, I guess you can favorite your own stuff. Let's favorite your own stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll say um, uh, data is favorite. No, we're not going to do it that way. Let's just do a heart.
Okay.
We'll do a black heart if it's not favorite and a red heart if it is.
Mm.
Um, Okay, and those are strings. Here we go. There we go. So we'll just get some visual representation of the state of things. There we go. Black heart right there. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So to make it so that we can make a mutation in our database, we're going
Mm-hmm.
to need to create a form that will post to an action. So we're going to change this a fair bit. And I'm just trying to think of the way that we want to do this. So I'm going to do it right here. Yeah, we'll do it like this. Yeah. There are a couple ways with different trade-offs that I don't think we have time to describe. So
Okay.
we're
It
going to
is
call this our favorite fetcher because we're going to make a fetch request here
okay.
with use fetcher that comes from Remix. And oh, nope, not fetchers. That's a different thing altogether. Use fetcher.
Yeah.
Oh, did we already have use fetcher in here?
Yeah, I think we
No, we
did.
didn't. Okay, cool. So we've got our favorite fetcher. And this has a component on it called a form. And this is going to be responsible for submitting our change to the state of this particular property.
Okay.
So yeah, it's Copilot is telling me to put a hidden input in here with the note ID. We actually don't need to do that because we're on a page that has a parameter for the note ID. So we already have enough information. We don't need to pass additional information. All we really need to pass is whether or not, like what state we want this to change into. So I am going to have a hidden input, but instead of it being the note ID, this is going to be or is favorited. Yeah, here we go. And we're going to have this be the opposite of what data is favorited is set to.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this needs to be stringified. String, I think. Yeah, there we go. And then we'll have a button that wraps this, and our type will be submit. And then we'll have an action that is takes our request, which is their data function args, and it's going to get the form from request.form data. Now, cool thing about this is a web platform API. So we're inside of libdom when we're using this API. And so if you're like, what is this request form data thing? Well, you literally go to MDN to find
Yeah.
out. You
Cool.
don't have to go look up the remix docs and see how do I use form data. That's just like a web platform thing, which I think is
Yeah.
cool. Okay, so then we can say whether it's favorited. Of course, this is an async API, so is favorited. If that is triple equal to true, then we know we want it to have a favorite or create a favorite for it.
Mm-hmm.
So now we can say if not is favorited. Whoops. Or let's start out. If it is favorited, then we need to create a new favorite for it. So await Prisma favorite create. Here's our data. The owner. Yeah, it's whoever created this thing. So here, let's actually do require user ID. So if you are not a user, then you can't favorite something.
Yeah.
So let's get our user ID. This will redirect them to login, which is cool. And here, let's just finish that up. And then our note ID is coming from the params, and that comes from here. That could be technically null. We can talk about that later. I never do this. Don't ever do it. In fact, let's not do it. Invariant.
Oh yeah.
We can talk about that, why that matters later.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's it, actually. So now we created it. And we don't need to really send anything particular back. So I'm not going to select anything. We'll just say select. Don't select anything. We don't need anything back. And then, actually, you know what? The same thing applies here. It's going to just be an empty object, or it's going to be null. We don't really need the ID. Okay, so if it's not been favorited, then we're going to delete the favorite. And in either case, we're going to return JSON that says status success, or whatever. We don't need to send the favorite that we just created or deleted or anything like that. There are various other things that you might send back depending on how you want this structured. But yeah, that's it. We've got our action built. We've got our button. I actually think this is done. Let's just take a look.
Yeah, let's test that.
And let's see what, it did not work. So let's see what I missed. Probably something very simple and silly. Oh, yeah, very simple and very silly. We need a method is post.
Cool.
Because the default behavior for a form is
right?
method is get, and Remix isn't in the business of changing web platform primitives and defaults.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So now if I click this, we'll see we get a post request, and whoa,
Okay.
that did not work at
Yeah.
all. Oh, oh, right. That's right. I'm required to log in. Hold on a second.
Nice.
Wasn't I
Okay.
logged in? Oh, I wasn't logged in. That's right. This should have been a better experience, though. I'm not sure what it was that why it didn't send me to the login screen, but we don't have time to figure out why that was.
Yeah, sure.
So what the heck? Oh, I know what's going on. Okay, so I need to actually handle this better in the Epic stack. But what happened is that we have a session with the previous seed data, and now that session doesn't exist in the new seed data. And so when I try to go to the login screen, it's not working. When I try to get the user ID, or require the user, that's not working either, because my session is for old data. So I need to handle that better. But yeah, now
Yeah, that's
this will work.
cool. I get it. So we're probably in a weird state
Okay,
of.
so we'll go to
Cool.
users. Whoops.
Okay.
This user and this note. Oh, whoops. Whoops. The select statement. Oh, right. Must not be empty. Oh, that's too bad. Fine. ID true. And we'll do the same thing
Okay.
for this one.
Oh,
That's interesting
can't
that we
we?
didn't get a TypeScript error for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we click on that and it's favorited. And we refresh
Mm.
and boom.
Cool.
We can go back and forth.
Yeah,
So we're
that's.
creating and deleting favorites like constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that's cool. I want to talk about a couple of really, really cool things about this that might be easy to overlook. But do you have any
Okay.
questions before I do?
Yeah. First is the can we do without the select statement?
This? No,
Yeah.
if I get rid of that, then it will select everything and send everything back.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah. Cool.
because I'm
Got it.
ignoring the results, I want to select as little as possible. So
Okay. Cool. That's fine. Got it. Yeah. That's my only question. Everything is really understandably good. Mm-hmm.
awesome. Okay, so I want to call out one thing in particular, and that
Okay.
is that there is no use state or use effect or use callback or use reducer or anything in here. You don't have to do that. There's no state management happening at all. And so what's really cool about that, well, I mean, just that's pretty cool by itself.
Yes.
But the reason that works is because Remix knows when you make a mutation because it's doing the mutations for you. And so when you do a mutation through Remix, it also knows all of the data that needs to be updated based on that mutation. So it goes and updates the data for you automatically. So when we say, okay, we complete this mutation, Remix says, oh, you did a mutation, so let me go and refresh the data on this page. So it actually calls this loader again to get a fresh version of the data. So when that happens, we go through this process of determining whether the user has a favorite or not, and that is sent back to us in the form of JSON, and our component re-renders. And so in Remix, your Redux store is basically your database. And so you never have to worry about keeping things in sync or anything like that. It is such an excellent experience. It makes doing stuff like this super easy. So yeah, I'm a super fan of this. Yeah, of this approach. I think it's just totally the right way to go. And another interesting thing here is if I go to my route here and I say, you know what, my site doesn't need JavaScript. So we're going to get rid of the scripts. Um, and so now you'll notice if we go to our source or our network and look for JS, there's no JavaScript happening on here.
Oh.
But the whole thing still works. If I click on that, boom, it unfavorites. If I click on it, it favorites again. So even without JavaScript or before the JavaScript finishes loading, this application is working. Let's do another example, because we're probably not going to want to disable scripts because we can do a lot of cool things with JavaScript.
Yeah.
Let's say that we're on a really slow network and we don't have a cache. We're coming here for the first time. And so I refresh this page and we're going to get the HTML. And then I come in here, and before the JavaScript is finished, I actually am able to submit this as a form. And so it's favorited now. We're appending this post. And once that finishes loading, now it's unfavorited. So as a user, if I'm on a slow network and I'm taking a while to download all of this JavaScript, I can actually still use the app. I can navigate between these different pages, even though the JavaScript isn't loaded yet.
Yeah.
I can actually submit these forms to like these different posts and stuff, even though the JavaScript hasn't finished loading yet. So even on a really slow network connection, I can effectively use the app, which I think is just really powerful. So I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so
Go ahead.
and another aspect of that is that's what allows us to have this really simple mental model of not having to worry about keeping our data up to date or anything like that, because Remix just emulates that same behavior themselves.
Oh.
So yeah, I had one other thing that I wanted to show. I know we're well over time now,
Yeah, that's
but
fine.
if you've
Please
got
go
time, I
ahead.
want to show you a quick way to do optimistic UI for this.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Great. Did you have any questions for me before we get into optimistic UI?
So I just have observations, which is, first of all, I think I built something similar to what you're doing with the Epic Stack, but it's not as glorious as this one. Mine is just a little because this one is just it's too good. So back then, I actually needed to have like a full stack solution to build salescast.com. So after I did whatever I did, I found out I did not need a state management library, and I couldn't even talk about it because it felt as if I was doing something wrong. So it was until RemixConf where Michael Jackson was actually saying the same thing, that you don't need a state management library with Remix, and you've actually said the same thing in your talks. I'm like, oh, I'm not doing anything wrong because like yeah, there was literally no need for it anymore because the state is coming from the database and everything. And the whole hassle of the states, the Redux or the Vuex or Pinia, that old code just gets away, just makes your life easier. So I love it.
100%. I completely agree. Is that the boring JS framework that you're working on?
Yes, it's the stack. It's not really a framework because it's based on sales. Sales is a very old, boring framework, but it's just amazing how I don't know if you know about inertia. It's a thing from the PHP world, but it's just
Mm-hmm.
amazing to build full stack SPA without an API. It's just amazing. Yeah, so
Mm.
that's it. Mm.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Okay. So so far, everything that we've done is actually, frankly, it's actually better as an MPA. If we didn't do anything else,
Yeah.
the MPA would be like removing the scripts like I did would actually be almost a better experience because of this. If I'm on a slow network connection, and let's say I've loaded the app and everything, as soon as I click on this heart, I don't get any feedback anywhere that that heart has been clicked.
Yeah.
Like it takes a while for that
Mm-hmm.
post to complete, and then for the revalidation of the data to finish. And so that's not a great user experience. At least if we had no JavaScript on the page and we were doing a full page refresh, we'd get a favicon spinner, and so the user could see, oh, okay, it is doing something. So we've actually made things a little bit worse by including JavaScript. Um,
Yes, we do.
so first, I'll show you the what it takes to make this give the user some sort of feedback with a pending UI, and then we'll make it optimistic.
Okay.
So to determine whether or not this is currently in a submitting state, we can actually get that from the favorite fetcher itself. So it has the form that we're rendering, but it also has the data that was sent back. So it would have the status success when it's finished.
Mhm.
It has the action, or so the URL that it's going to be submitting to, the encoding type, the method,
Oh,
and
okay.
then also the submission, the form data itself, the current state, all of that stuff. So for us, what I'm going to do is we're going to say, oh, I can't remember if it's, yeah, it's the state. If the
Mhm.
state is anything but idle, then we know we're currently pending, like something is happening, and
Yeah.
so we can say if it's not idle, then we are pending favorite. And then we can come down here and we'll add some sort of indicator. I think I've actually got a spinner in the um, code base. I just can't remember. Yeah, show spinner
Okay.
right there. We'll just stick that next to the button. And so now let's speed this up so we can get that refresh there. There we go. It does have HMR, but yeah, I'm
Mhm.
not used to using HMR. I like refreshing the page. But yeah, so now I click on this and it did not do what I expected it to do. So I probably am using the spinner wrong.
Okay.
Um, let's see here. Mm, hmm. Yeah, that's weird. Why did that not work? Let's dive into this. We've got this. If I click on it, then we are getting something here, but I think I'm probably using the spinner wrong, or something is
Mhm.
displayed improperly. So let's skip that. I can't remember
Mhm.
how to use the spinner. And
That's
instead we'll
fine.
just say pending favorite, um, just do a dot dot dot. Okay. So your designer will give you some really nice designs for
Mhm.
how to do this properly. Okay, I think HMR finished. Here we go. So now I click on that and boom, we get the dot, dot, dot. So we can give the user some feedback that something is going on.
Yeah.
I am responding to the thing that you just did. So that's
Mhm.
great. But even better would be if like we know what the UI is going to look like when it's all done. And so we don't need to show a dot, dot, dot. We could actually just change uh, whether we're showing the solid heart or not. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to say favorited, or is favorited. And we're going to base that on the data unless we're pending. And if we are pending, then we're going to say favorite fetcher dot form data get the is favorited
Okay.
um, equals true. And really, we only care to, well, let's see. Yeah, there we go. Because form data could be undefined, but not in the case that it's pending. So yeah.
Mhm.
But if it equals true, then we know we're going to be favorited. If it's equals anything but true, it's going to be unfavorited. And so now we can use that in place of anywhere where we were using data dot is favorited.
Oh,
So now we've got, and here, now we can get rid of this dot 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 because
yeah.
the user is just going to see the pending or see the optimistic UI experience anyway.
Cool.
So assuming that HMR worked, I should be able to just click that and boom, it instantly changes. And I can go back and forth as many times as I like, even though the network is really slow.
Mhm.
I'm able to make all of those changes, and the end result is going to be correct. You'll see all these requests are canceled. You can't
Mhm.
actually cancel a request. You can just cancel handling the response of that request. And
Mhm.
so those requests are going to the backend and everything. But the point is, the last request that goes to the backend is going to be the one that wins when
Mhm.
it's all is said and done.
Cool.
And so, yeah, that's why I can just keep on going back and forth between favorited and unfavorited, even though
Mhm.
those requests are unfinished, because I'm deriving my favorite state based on what the
Yeah.
submission is going to be. And
Oh.
that's it. Even if there's an error, because like optimistic UI is easy unless you want to handle rollback, and then it becomes hard.
Mhm.
So even if there's an error and we say throw a new error, oh no, then Remix will actually handle rollback for you as well. So assuming HMR is done, we click on this and it instantly changes, and then it all blows up. Whoops. Oh, right. I need to do this differently.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, we just return a JSON that says error. Oh no. There we go. So you need to handle your errors.
Yeah.
But
For sure.
yeah, if there's like some sort of error happens because we updated it wrong or something like that, then here, let's go to a page that's not busted. We click on this, it instantly changes to red. And when it revalidates, it actually is going to say, oh, that actually never was favorited. And so we're back to the right
Mm,
spot. And
cool.
here, of course, you could display the error. That's what Twitter does, is it says, sorry, that tweet was deleted or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's not difficult to do. But yeah, you get a lot of
Mm,
yeah, like really awesome things right out of the box. And like I've built optimistic UI in a lot of things, and it's never been this easy ever. It's never this easy. But
wow.
we've handled all edge cases just with
Mhm.
like these 2 lines of code, and that's it.
Mm,
So,
interesting. Yeah. This is amazing, really, because I did a space also this week on optimistic UI.
oh, cool.
Yeah, it was really cool, and actually seeing the keynote from Michael Jackson and Ryan Flores, I I asked the question on Twitter, and it turned out that most folks don't really know what it is. So I actually decided to do like an hour space on Tuesday about it. And the the real question is, how do you handle rollback? Because of course that is a thing, error happens. But with what we've shown in Remix, and because it comes baked in, it's just too much of a flex at this point. It's so easy.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's good. I love it really.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I think we're well
Mm-hmm.
over our time, but
Yeah.
that covered a lot of things. Like we looked at database migration, deploying to production,
Yeah.
the like creating new routes, optimistic UI and pending UI. So yeah, we got a lot
Yeah.
looked through. And oh, we talked about testing is
Yep.
all built in as well. Yeah, Tailwind, of course. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that we didn't really cover.
Um.
We didn't actually look at the login process, so I'll show you that here really quick.
Okay.
If you want to log in as a new user, and you can say myriadexample.com, and locally, so in production, that will send an actual email.
Mm-hmm.
Locally, you'll just get that email logged out here, and
Okay.
it gives you this verification code that you can then use here, and that verifies that you actually are the owner of that email, and then you can go through the onboarding process.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar thing for the forgot password flow. So we can say, I forgot my password for Cody, and we get that logged out here. And what's interesting is sending emails. You definitely can do this without. Um, oh, and actually, I guess I should mention also that rather than just doing the um, um, having to copy paste that code,
Mm-hmm.
we also send a link that has that all pre-filled,
Oh,
so that
cool.
you don't have to worry about that too. So you get like magic links as well as short codes all in
Mm-hmm.
one, which is kind of nice. But
Wow.
yeah, so and that feature was implemented just yesterday with the short
Wow.
codes. It used to be something else.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the Epic Web tips, where are we? Right here, improve UX and security with time-based one-time passwords. You can take
Mm-hmm.
a look at that later. But
Cool.
yeah, so the thing that I wanted to mention about that, I totally forgot actually. Anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
it's great and it's all built in, and you don't have to think about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Definitely. This is. I feel you are as close to mostly Rails or Laravel in terms of DX. And yeah, so I really love how the thoughts and everything you've covered. So just one thing I want to clear, um like have clarity on, is how do you do updates? Because that's something that have always bugged me in making like a project starter. Like how do you do updates?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know that like um, it is a pain for sure. But the it is basically an impossible problem, because let's say that you jump on the Epic stack, you generate a project, but you don't like the way that I'm hosting images, and you want to use S3 or Cloudinary or something like that instead, or Cloudflare. And so you rip all of that out and change it to that. Now your data model is different. Your endpoints for different things are all different. How could any, like, short of AI doing it all for us, how could any automated technology
Yeah,
possibly manage updates when you make such an enormous change to the core, right? It is an intractable problem. And
true.
so um, that is something that you um, like just have to accept when you're talking about using a generator. That
Hmm.
said, the alternative to using a generator is writing it all by hand from scratch yourself. So like you're in an even worse place if you don't use the generator, right? So
Yeah.
the fact that you can't keep your app up to date um, really is not a huge deal because we're still miles ahead. Anyway, so
True.
it's like almost like somebody says, "Here's a car that you cannot recharge. Like the battery is locked. You can't recharge this car." You say, "Well, I can't recharge the car. I don't want it at all." And it's like, "Well, but you can get like 500 miles down the road before
Hmm.
you have to get out and abandon the car. So like, I guess I'll take the car.
Yeah.
Like it's okay."
Yeah.
Just
Cool.
because I can't update it in the future. So I don't want to downplay the like how frustrating that is that you don't get the updates, at least automatically. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's better than not being able to use the generator at all.
Yeah.
That
True.
said, you can take a look at the commit history and like look at diffs and things. I do a fairly good job of making announcements in the GitHub discussions of specific features and changes that have been made that you can look at. There's also I do decision documents. So when I make a pretty big change, I write exactly like why we're making this change and why this decision was made. So you can decide if you want to apply that to your app. So in some ways, the fact that you generate the project and then you are now forked from the main thing, that actually can be a good thing because you can make like different opinions. You can,
Hmm.
if you care enough, you can change it and not have to worry about like convincing me to accept your change.
Mm.
So like, well, I think some of these things we can move into open source libraries and use those so those can stay up to date. And we've got documentation on how to update those. Um, there are some things that don't really make sense in at that level of abstraction, and I think
Yeah.
that's a good thing. And so, yeah, you cannot stay up to date, but I don't think that's actually as big
Mm.
a problem as people think.
Yeah, sure. I think that makes a lot of sense because what you're given is a starter template. So once you've made your app from it, right? Um, we can't fully update anything automatically because this the code is ever going to be moving. You're going to take out stuff and all that stuff. So yeah, but I feel that's a good thing because you can now go on and build your own thing on top of it. But you have like a great deal of advantage from just using the template already, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, sure. That makes a lot of sense because it has always bugged my mind, that bit of it all. But yeah, so that's a good trade-off to do, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool. So yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoy this session really because of course I'm interested in full stack web dev and the Epic stack, and it was really nice having you here. So do you have any final words or any plug you want to give to anyone that is watching this session? Mhm.
Um, I think definitely take a look at Epic Web Dev. I've got good articles and tutorials and tips on there already that are all free. Um, Eventually, I'll have workshops on there that will be paid, and it will all focus around the Epic stack. And even if you're not using the Epic stack, or even if you're not using React at all, or like lots of the pieces of the Epic stack, there's still a lot to learn from the Epic stack. And so like just learning about the merits of an encrypted token versus a one-time password, like
Mhm.
I shared yesterday. That like there's a lot that you could apply to any app, regardless of whether it's using the Epic stack. So
Mm.
don't write off the Epic stack just because you disagree with some of the opinions, and you would never generate a project. There are a lot of really well thought through opinions in there that you can reference and apply to your own project. And when Epic Web is has got workshops on it, even though they are going to be centered around the Epic stack, they're the things that you learn in that will still be very much applicable wherever you're developing your web apps, and however you're doing that. So yeah, give those things a look.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I know I'm actually definitely going to learn a lot from the Epic Stack because I feel there's so much to learn as I build this boring JavaScript thing. But where does one go to see you? Like to, um, after seeing this session, I want to reach out to Kent C. Dodds. Like, where can we find you online?
Yeah, yeah. So there are a couple of ways to do this. So I'm active on Twitter, and I try to reply as often as I can. I also have a contact form on my website, kentcdodds.com/contact. Um, and I can't always reply to those either, but I try.
Mhm.
The best place is my office hours. I have office hours every Thursday. Oh
Okay.
man, I'm missing office hours right now. Whoops.
Oh,
So
again.
no, that's okay. I totally forgot. But yeah. So or do I have office hours? Hold on a second. I
Okay.
It's not on my calendar, so that's weird. Whoops. Um, just check that really quick. Yeah, I
Hmm.
guess I accidentally deleted that on my calendar, but I'll probably start office hours as soon as we're done here.
Yeah, sure.
And so yeah, come to my office hours. You can. It's a Zoom call, and so you just join, and you can even share your screen if you need to share some code and stuff. And then I also have a podcast called the Call Kent podcast, where you just log in onto my site, you record yourself in the web app, asking a question, and then I record my response, and our conversation turns into a podcast episode. So if you don't need to like show any code or something, that's actually my preferred way to answer questions. And then I live stream on YouTube pretty regularly as well. So
Yeah.
check out my YouTube.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to leave links to all those things you just mentioned in the description. So thank you so much, Kent, for your time. I really love the session. Thank you.
Hey, I really enjoyed it as well. So thank you for giving me this opportunity, Calvin.
Yeah, sure thing.